To start off today's program, would you please stand, which you are, thank you. U.S. Army Korean War veteran and American Legion chaplain Arthur Pellerin will perform an invocation. Uncover.
Let us pray. Almighty God, giver of all victories, we thank Thee for the opportunities which abide in our land. For Thee the guidance in the hour of peril, and Thee the tender love in times of need. Help us to remember with reverence and value and devotion of our departed comrades. Not only those whose body consecrate our country's soil, but also those who sleep beyond the seas, and those others whose resting place will not be known until it's dead. Keep us forever firm in righteousness and purpose. Amen. Cover.
Would you please remain standing? We have a group of Girl Scouts who would like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Thank you very much, ladies. You may be seated. Today is a celebration in recognition, originally observed as Armistice Day, the 11th day, 11th month, marked the anniversary of the end of World War I and honored its fallen. As our country and much of the world were mourned, there remained a desperate glimmer of hope that the Great War could indeed be the war to end all wars. We know that it wasn't. World War I followed less than 2 decades later. Then the Korean War, the Vietnam War, and the Gulf War. It's only 3 years ago that the longest war ever, the war in Afghanistan, ended. As war and conflict continued, so did the courage and sacrifice of American men and women who defended our nation and its interests. Many paid the ultimate sacrifice. On this 70th Veterans Day, I'm grateful to be here with you to honor all our veterans who came before us, those that have stood alongside us, and those that will come after us. To those veterans here today, thank you. Your service and sacrifice represent the best of us and the best of America. We salute you and appreciate the great costs that often come with serving. Veterans and service members, if you are able to please stand to be recognized, please do so. Thank you. You may be seated. Let's also take a moment to acknowledge those families who have helped shoulder the weight of war and the burdens of sacrifice. To the mothers, fathers, spouses, and children of our military men and women, thank you. Veterans Day is a time when we remind our fellow Americans to stop and say thank you to those who served. Those simple words are very important, but they're just the beginning. I encourage you, whether you're a civilian or a veteran, to dig deeper. Ask questions, listen to their stories, take an interest in the experiences and sacrifices of those who allow us to live out our own stories in a country that is safe and free. Doing so is more powerful than you know. This Veterans Day, let us celebrate what we can accomplish when we come together. Let's recognize that service doesn't end in the military and that thank you is just the beginning of gratitude. You being here today tells me that you're willing to go further. Thank you. Next, I'd like to invite Senator John J. Cronin, a U.S. Army West Point graduate and Afghanistan War veteran, to the podium. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us here on this beautiful day to honor our veterans. Since I left the Army more than 5 years ago, Veterans Day has become more special to me each year, and I have especially come to appreciate the time of its observance on the calendar, especially every other year, like this year, when Veterans Day falls closely behind yet another divisive national election. If you read the newspaper, listen to talk radio, watch cable news, or have a pulse, it is no secret that our country is sharply divided along partisan lines in a manner that cannot long endure. And as President Lincoln said, a house divided against itself cannot stand. To me, Veterans Day is a salient opportunity for all of us to be reminded that there is more, much more, that binds us together as Americans than divides us. Just look to our veterans. There's a special distinction that makes America's military and its service members unique among the world's nations: their oath. Our service members and our veterans did not swear allegiance to a president, to a political party, to a general, or to a king and queen. Every member of the United States military swears an oath of allegiance to support and to defend the Constitution and the values of self-determination, liberty, freedom, and the rule of law enshrined in that sacred document. Veterans' oath and fidelity to the Constitution binds generations of veterans together, from the Revolution to the Civil War, to World War I and II, to Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan, and every period of service in between. I want to share a part of that oath today. I do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same. I hope that oath and those words give comfort to us all, because they are the North Star for every man and woman that wears the uniform and serves our country today. One of the greatest gifts you receive during military service is that shared oath and the collective commitment with your comrades to something larger than yourself. The most gratifying part of my own service in the Army was being a part of the most diverse, cohesive team in the world. I served with people from every state, of every race, gender, background, religion, creed, and political view imaginable. We served together, we fought together, and we always put our mission, our oath, and each other first. From that shared experience, veterans understand intrinsically that there is more that binds us together than divides us. As veterans, we have a duty to not let the rest of the nation forget it. Consider what our veterans have sacrificed and given up to honor their oath and serve our country. Their youth, their physical and mental health, time with their families, even their lives. On Veterans Day, all Americans can reflect on that sacrifice and reflect on our common bonds as Americans and recommit to work together and come together to meet head-on the intractable powers of power and politics of division that threaten our future. That's how we honor the fallen. That's how we honor our veterans. That's how we honor those who wear the uniform and serve us today. God bless America. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Cronin. Next, I'd like to invite Westford Select Board Chair, Mr. Scott Hazelton, to say a few words.
Good morning. Thank you, Terry. Thank you for all of you for coming out this morning. A passage that my pastor used yesterday in a sermon struck me as something very relevant for today. Exodus chapter 1, verse 8 says, "Now there arose a new king over Egypt who did not know Pharaoh." There arose a new king over Egypt who did not know Joseph. We all remember in Sunday school classes, Joseph was the boy with the coat of many colors, sold into slavery by his brothers, who grew up to interpret dreams of Pharaoh and save the country from famine. How could they forget that in 350 years? Maybe they did really forget. Or maybe the new Pharaoh preferred not to remember the debt he owed to Joseph. Perhaps he did not want to remember Joseph because if he did, he'd be obligated to care for Joseph's people. We think that we could never forget our veterans, and yet for 363 days of the year, we pretty much do. In 1980, 18% of our population were veterans. In 2000, that was 12.7%. Today, it's just 6%. That's why it's so important that we remember the fallen on Memorial Day and all those who served on Veterans Day. We need to remember the debt we owe them, our obligation to care for them and their families every day. We just had an election. No matter how your candidate fared, think a veteran that your voice could be heard. Tomorrow night, the Select Board will meet in Town Hall. You can come and criticize your government. You can thank a veteran for that. Now today I want to forego my usual history lesson and make some observations about two veterans who are important to me. My father and my Uncle Llewellyn, both who've got signs around the common. Dad was not a model soldier. He was a stubborn, free spirit, an old Yankee from New Hampshire. It seems fitting that the Army should make him an MP so he can enforce the very rules he sometimes found counterproductive. He was a Korean War veteran, but stationed in Hanau, Germany, outside of Frankfurt. He talked very little about his service when I was a kid, but he loved Germany. His favorite place was a little Schloss in Bad Homburg, where we often went on a day pass. There's a family shop there. He'd buy Hummels or China to send home. And one day, when the train pulled out to take him back to the base, the shopkeeper's daughter ran out waving a 10 Deutschmark note he'd overpaid. And Dad waved back, "Just keep it." I did the math. I said, "Dad, 10 Deutschmarks was a lot of money for a corporal in those days." And he said, "Yes, but they needed it more than I did." Remember, in 1950, Germany was still recovering from World War II. We owe a debt to the many thousands who defeated Nazi Germany. We also owe a debt to thousands like Dad who won the peace by treating Germany as an ally and not as a defeated enemy. So my first observation is we owe a debt to all of our veterans that made a difference, even if they didn't see combat. Dad came home like most veterans, married, had a family, taught high school, led my Cub Scout pack, my Boy Scout troop, served as church deacon and church trustee. He handled the business matters of the church, cared for those in need. He was a Mason, barbershop singer. In short, he came home and served his community. And I guess observation number two is, just like the veterans here today, most of them come home and serve our country and their community after the service ends. Uncle Llewellyn volunteered for the Army Air Corps before Pearl Harbor. He was career Air Force, serving World War II in Korea, mostly in Asia, island hopping across the Pacific of World War II, in Okinawa during the Korean War. When stateside, he was based in South Carolina. When he came home, he had a motorcycle, which my sister and I thought was really cool. My grandparents disagreed. I was probably a preteen when I asked him about his service in World War II. He started out with a joke. Well, the Marines took the island, the Army mopped it up, the Navy Seabees built our base, and the Air Force just moved in. And being young, I didn't take the hint. I persisted and asked what it was really like. He was ground operations, not a flyer. Almost every day, he said, we would count the planes that took off, we count the ones that landed, and some days the two weren't the same. And some days I knew the ones that didn't come back. So the next observation is there are some things only veterans can really understand. Uncle Llewellyn was married only briefly, he never had kids. The Air Force was his life. As you might guess, with a name like Llewellyn, he had a nickname, Zeke. When he died, Dad got notes from many of his former comrades, and there was a theme. Zeke bailed my butt out of jail when I got in a fight off base. Zeke paid my gambling debt when I got in too deep with the wrong element. I blew my pay in the bar and elsewhere, and Zeke floated me the money to pay child support. Now, you might remember Dad was also free with his money. You might think the lesson is that Hazelton men are bad with money. Well, that might be true, but the real lesson is that there are some things more important than money, and veterans take care of each other. I have two pictures of Uncle Llewellyn that I cherish. One is the young man that you see on the sign. The other is an old man, confined to a wheelchair, bent in the back with a blanket over his lap. But he stood in the flag raising at his VA hospital, as the staff said he did every single day when they even had to wheel him out. And observation number 5 is a veteran never forgets to honor his or her country. Lastly, on my first trip to Korea, I met our office director. He was a boy during the Korean War, and he told me of his gratitude to our servicemen and servicewomen. When I told him that Dad and my uncle were veterans but never set foot in Korea, he said 2 things. First, thank your mother for me. And second, it didn't matter if they served in Korea or not. When I took the oath, they had no idea where they were going. So, observations 6 and 7, the family of our veterans serve too. They worry daily with uncertainty. They care for the children. They comfort each other. We are as indebted to them as we are to our veterans. And also, every veteran showed incredible bravery when they took their oath. They had no idea where they would be sent to go, what they would be asked to do. They signed a blank check for each one of us, for any amount, up to and including their lives. The roles might not make headlines, but without them, no mission would succeed. Those who served have endured the same separations from family, the same first missteps, anniversaries, birthdays. They face dangers in training or hostile territories, and the same commitment to duty. So back to my original thought on remembering our veterans and the debt we owe them. We can't ever fully repay that debt, but to rephrase JFK, ask not what your country can do for our veterans, but what you can do. Let's make every day Veterans Day by striving to build a nation worthy of their sacrifice. Let's preserve their legacy so that future generations do not forget. We should support museums and memorials. And I want to make a shout out to Dave Christiana from our fire department, who spends hours maintaining Westford's memorials. We need more like him to help him. We should encourage our veterans to share their stories and experience with younger generations, and we should record that for posterity. This VA hospital just on the road in Bedford, we can volunteer. We can make sure to hire veterans for our businesses and patronize veteran-owned businesses. Finally, to our veterans, your contributions matter. Your service has made a difference in your country, and we are grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Hazelton. At this time, I'd like to extend a special welcome to today's guest speaker, Dr. Stephany Godfrey, a U.S. Air Force Iraq War veteran and a local physician, to speak to us today.
Good morning. First, I want to thank you, Terry, for inviting me here today. I'm honored to speak with you on this very special occasion with Chaplain Pellerin, Senator Cronin, and Chairman Hazelton. Today, we come together to recognize the courage, dedication, and sacrifices of our veterans, the men and women who have selflessly served our country to protect the freedoms we enjoy every day. To all the veterans with us today, and those who have served throughout our nation's history, we are deeply grateful for your service. You stood ready to defend our country, putting yourself in harm's way, often far from your homes and families. You faced difficult challenges with honor, humility, and an unwavering commitment to duty. Your sacrifice allows us to live freely, and we cannot thank you enough for that gift. It's easy to take granted the peace and security we enjoy in our everyday lives, but our veterans remind us that these things are not things that come without cost. I also want to take a moment to honor the families of our veterans, the parents, spouses, children, and friends who stood by them with strength and patience. Your love and support are just as vital to our country's strength, and today we thank you as well. I am a mom, a daughter, a family medicine physician. I am the wife of a retired Army Lieutenant Colonel, and I too am a veteran. I certainly did not set out with any aspirations to join the military, despite a tradition in my family. My grandfather was a pilot in the U.S. Navy and retired as a Naval Reserve commander. My father served as a hospital corpsman in the U.S. Navy Reserves. My life plan was a career in medicine that started in Biddeford, Maine. A life-changing event occurred my second month of medical school that at the time I had no idea would alter the course of my life. On a routine Tuesday morning, we were sitting in class when our dean walked in with a horrified look on her face. She tearfully told us that a plane had crashed into the World Trade Center. I watched as my classmates who had loved ones in New York City panicked, and those who had been commissioned into the military realized what this meant for their futures. A year and a half later, I had applied for a fellowship at my school, one that would require an extra year of training, but would waive the cost of 2 years of medical school. I was the 5th person selected, with only 4 spots available. Had I been chosen, I inevitably would have ended up living and practicing in Maine, which is where I thought I was destined. I remember how heartbroken I felt at the time, but instead, I looked at my options for third-year training and decided on Watertown, New York. Within a week of arriving there, my classmates and I went to a fall festival at Sackett's Harbor near Fort Drum. That day, I met a spry Army captain who had just returned from Iraq, who suggested 2 things to me. First, that I consider a career in the military, and second, that I go see a movie with him. As fate intervened, an Air Force recruiter came to my hospital a few days later. I did go on that date, and in both instances, one thing led to another. Within a few years, I found myself both married and commissioned as an Air Force captain. My take-home point with this story is sometimes life does not go according to plan. We often don't get what we think we want, but it's essential to continue to move forward, to remain open to new opportunities, and not get stuck in what could have been. When it was time to choose where I wanted to be stationed, on my dream sheet I listed the bases with residencies, since I was chief resident in my hospital and I wanted to continue to teach. I also listed amazing overseas locations where we could explore the world. And last on my list, I added Hanscom, close to where I grew up. Turns out I was the only physician who listed Hanscom, and that's where I end up, base number 18 out of 18. But with my shiny new captain's bars and an eagerness to start my practice, I served on active duty for 4 years, mostly at the military treatment facility on base. I also deployed overseas to Iraq in support of our Operation Iraqi Freedom in 2010. Unlike many in the service who deploy with their unit, I traveled alone and was attached to the Army Special Forces as part of the Combined Joint Special Operations Task Force. I did some truly amazing training prior to my deployment, working critical care at shock trauma in Baltimore, getting rolled over in a Humvee, and taking control of a simulated occupied village during Army combat skills training in Texas. Experiences at the time that just felt surreal. While in Iraq, I had the incredible opportunity to travel to rural parts of the country and treat Iraqi families. I traveled in Chinooks in the middle of the night, by MRAPs throughout the countryside, and stayed at Forward Operating Bases, or FOBs, where the Operational Detachment Alpha, or ODA team of 12 incredible soldiers who are cross-trained in a variety of disciplines, such as intelligence, weapons, and communications, were located. I should have warned you, my speech includes a lot of 3-letter acronyms, or what I call TLAs. When not on what my husband termed combat tourism, my primary job was coordinating transfer of injured soldiers through Balad, where I was stationed, and on to Landstuhl, Germany, as well as treating the day-to-day ailments of the sailors and airmen in my joint MTF. While a lot of what I treated was self-inflicted P90X injuries, I also saw the manifestation of the trauma that modern warfare offers. In order to touch on what I feel is a critical issue in our society, but most notably among soldiers, I'd like to give a brief history on PTSD. In the 1700s, physicians would refer to symptoms of homesickness, depression, anxiety, and insomnia that soldiers experienced due to warfare as nostalgia. Another term that was proposed was soldier's heart, which assumed a physical injury was the cause of the symptoms: rapid heartbeat, shortness of breath, and anxiety. It was felt these were due to physical overstimulation of the heart's nervous system. Tragically, many soldiers were simply provided drugs to ease their physical symptoms and were returned to battle. By the time Armistice Day was proclaimed, celebrating the end of World War I in 1919, the term to describe what we now know as PTSD was shell shock, thought to be a nervous system reaction to the explosion of artillery shells causing damage to the brain. Over the decades, many other terms developed: war neurosis, combat stress reaction, or battle fatigue. The treatment for these conditions was woefully lacking and would range from offering soldiers an inadequate few days off to traumatic electroshock therapy. Equally as tragic, prominent military leaders did not believe that battle fatigue was real, and a stigma formed that has persisted to today. Each war has its own unique contributing factors to the development of PTSD. World War I and World War II led to extreme and repeated death, injury, and destruction. The Korean War saw intense, constant battles and exhausting guerrilla warfare. Vietnam added to the horrors of war due to their controversy of this conflict and how soldiers were treated upon returning home. The War on Terror was a very different type of conflict, fought not on a battlefield, but instead with repeated, short-term individual missions amongst the population of Iraq and Afghanistan. Leaving the normalcy of base, being under constant high alert due to threat from IEDs and rocket-propelled grenades, and then returning back to modern amenities, communicating with home about day-to-day issues with the kids, the neighbors, or the dishwasher, and then heading back out is incredibly damaging to the psyche. These same concerns affect our first responders. Our incredible police, firefighters, EMTs, and paramedics constantly put themselves into harm's way with the demanding and unpredictable nature of their work, combined with the cumulative stress experienced over time. As I mentioned before in my clinic, most of the soldiers, sailors, and airmen's complaints were physical. They either injured themselves while performing their duties, or perhaps pushed it too far in the gym. No one hesitated to tell me their ailments, how the injury occurred, and all were willing to do the exercises I prescribed. But sadly, few were willing to open up about how they were doing emotionally, how this war was taking its toll on their psychological well-being. A second point I want to drive home today is there is nothing more important than our mental health. Destigmatizing and normalizing emotional struggles and suffering, reaching out for help, and strengthening and healing our mind the way we don't hesitate to strengthen and heal in our bodies is essential. There are countless resources available through your own personal physician, our town's health department website, through the VA, or our town's own VSO. Please know we are there to help. Finally, what I learned in my time in the military is that soldiers come from every walk of life. They have different backgrounds, beliefs, and perspectives. But when they step onto the field, in training or in battle, none of that separates them. They are brothers and sisters united in a common purpose. It doesn't matter where they were born, who they prayed to, or what political views they held. What matters is that they have each other's backs. They fight not just for their country, but for each other. As civilians, we often lack this sense of unity outside the military. It's easy to get caught up in our differences, our political divides, our cultural perspectives. But our veterans remind us that we're capable of coming together despite those differences. Their service shows us that unity isn't just possible, it's essential to our strength as a nation. One of the best ways to honor our veterans is by carrying their example into our own lives. If they could come together on the front lines, risking everything as one, then surely we can find common ground in our communities and in our nation. Let's honor the sacrifices not only by remembering them today, but by working together to build the kind of unity that they exemplify in their service. As we leave here today, I ask each of you to take a moment to reflect on what our veterans have given us. Let us take inspiration from their dedication, their resilience, and their spirit of service. Let us honor their legacy by showing our commitment to each other, whether in small acts of kindness or by working together toward a stronger, more unified community. To our veterans, your courage, resilience, and devotion are a testament to the best of what America stands for. Today and every day, we are grateful. Thank you, and may God bless our veterans, their families, our community, and our country.
Thank you, Dr. Godfrey. At this time, as we close out our service, I would like to reinvite Chaplain Pellerin, who will do the benediction, followed by the Westford Academy Band trumpeters will perform taps, and then followed by the Westford District bagpipers will perform Amazing Grace in salute to our fallen veterans. Chaplain Pellerin.
Uncover. Almighty God, the hour has come when we must part. May we be strong and brave, living such lives of stainless integrity as shall reflect honor upon our country and the veterans of foreign wars of the United States, and glorify the great and the holy name. May the good providence shield us from all harm, watch over those who even now guard the gates of freedom, and bring us together again in true comradeship and peace. Amen. Cover.
Thank you. And now our Westford Academy Band trumpeters will perform taps. Thank you, everyone. This concludes today's service. Again, thank you for joining us on a beautiful day in November. Troops are dismissed.